Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our look at the Adventures of Luther Arkwright. This episode will look at number 5 through 9, finishing off the first epic story of Luther Arkwright by Brian Talbot. This stuff gets even better all the time. This is some amazing stuff, and I can't wait to show it to you. So let's get these out of here, and we'll start with number 5. This was published in 1990 by Dark Horse Comics, reprinting the English editions of the story, published by Valkyrie Press, maybe a year or two earlier. Another new crazy Brian Talbot cover. This is quite like an exploitation film. This is some gore, sex and violence, and craziness going on. Title page, Chapter 5, The Theater of Cruelty. So this issue, if you can't tell from the camera, the paper is a little whiter. It's not quite like slick paper, but it's kind of in between newsprint and slick. And unfortunately, this is the only issue that does this, because if any art needs, better paper, it's this, as we can see by this first page here of the American Reporter, Hiram Kowalski. Look at this illustration, guys. This is some amazing stuff. The strange thing is, though, this body language of him right here, this looks vaguely familiar, or intensely familiar. Like, is there a Hellblazer that uses the same exact position? I don't know. I could have dreamt it. But man, look at his chops. Brian Talbot's just getting out of hand. I assume we're definitely in the second half now. So I think this is the stuff he did between 87 and 89. I'm not quite sure, though. So we see Hiram. He's kind of trapped in the maze of London. I think he's still in the maze. He's somewhere holed up in London. And he's still sending his articles back to America to be published. Talking about Black Tuesday, which we saw last issue, where the Charles II, who was gonna be the next king, maybe, he was killed, and things have gotten really bad since then, as we'll find out from Hiram's report. I like this little panelology here, just showing little bits of scenery. Whoa, this is pretty gnarly. So I guess in the past week or two, Cromwell has cracked down, the Puritan fascist state of England has cracked down on all the rebels, any Catholics. It's basically a reign of terror. And we see Pennington here, the head of, he's basically like the head of the SS. They're just killing people willy-nilly, beating the shit out of them. It's a really brutal time. Man, sorry guys, I'm getting distracted by how beautiful this art is. It's just fine illustration. So here we have a surprise. Turns out Harry Fairfax isn't quite dead. He's not dead at all, I should say. He actually, that crap that fell on him didn't kill him, even though he's pretty injured. So, but not too injured to make his escape. He even kills one of the Puritan soldiers and runs off. And now we bid adieu to Hiram with this nice camera pull-out. And we get to see the London Bridge here. Now we see one of those flashback things. And we see Luther Arkwright during the time when he was living on the street. And I guess since he escaped the disruptors, when he was a teenager, they'd basically been putting him under psychic assault all the time. So that's why he became a drug addict, because it's just he can't take the pain. It's constantly, these disruptors are attacking him mentally. So he's a total junkie at this point. and his body and his brain are just a wreck. He has this hallucination of Britannia, the spirit of England falling in battle. He sees Octobriana, he sees the monks. Once again, Brian Talbot is foreshadowing stuff. Like, he really planned this whole epic out. I like this. I like both of his art styles. You know, they're very illustrative, like Hogarth type style, or Gustave Doré. But then this kind of airbrushy style is really cool looking too. And one night, I guess, you know, as he's roaming the streets searching for junk, the disruptors finally catch up to him, and he's running from them. And that's when he first meets Rose Wild, and she basically rescues him and brings him to 00, you know, the Valhalla Nova, as it's called, the good universe. And that's when he started working for Valhalla Nova. We see the 00 version of Rose. I guess she's in love with this man, Carl. So she doesn't date Luther in this dimension. We see more of these reports of random bad occurrences due to fire frost being activated, and they're just getting more and more intense. World War III, nuclear holocaust. We're going to see a lot of those. We see Cromwell in all of his glory, his fascist glory. Obviously, he's basically a total Hitler. There's a little aside here. An American Innocent in London by Oliver North, UCA ambassador to England, 1978 to 1984, where he's talking about how, remember earlier I said that Cromwell had banned all representational art as being sinful? Well, I guess the second to most recent Cromwell kind of fudged it a little and said, oh, if it's used for propaganda, it's okay. So just another parallel to Hitler, how he put such a importance on visual propaganda, posters and film. So there is like posters up and statues to Cromwell, but that's about it. God, the amount of work he puts into these pages is incredible. So meanwhile, there's two new characters come into play. There's these two clerics. I don't know if they're bishops. They're pretty high up in the church. And they are plotting to kill Cromwell. They know all about his, sinful, hypocritical ways. How he's been basically raping women and killing them. And just basically being an all-around perv. And I guess it's starting to show. He's got all these herpes scars on his face. So these two bishops are just like, yep, we're going to kill him. We got to take him out. So there's a little intrigue there. We get back to Cromwell giving a speech. Kind of an interesting page here. Almost like something Dave Sim would do. So the whole page is dedicated to dialogue. It's basically a typical fascist type speech. But meanwhile, while he's giving the speech, he's thinking about his childhood. And this horrible thing happened to him as a kid. One day his father caught him masturbating, the previous Cromwell. And he beat his penis with a steel rod until it was kind of injured, permanently injured. And so we realized that this he's just a sad fuck up. He's been fucked up by his father, by the church, by, just all that kind of stuff. And he actually kind of almost has this incident where he just starts drooling. He can't stop thinking about his father maiming his member. So they hustle him off the stage. Now we're back at Valhalla Nova. And even Wotan, the massive computer that kind of runs their dimension, even it is feeling the effects of fire frost. And it's starting to malfunction, which has never happened before. So the panic level is rising. We go back to those two bishops, and they've got a briefcase bomb. They're going to take it into a meeting with Cromwell, because they're due to meet him soon. and then they're going to try to excuse themselves before the bomb goes off. Now we see Cromwell talking to the disruptors. Is that their name? I think I'm forgetting what they're called. Whatever, the bad guys. And we kind of realize that, you know, ever since Oliver Cromwell's son took over, they've been allies. Basically, we find out that these disruptors go from dimension to dimension and offer their technology to the people there to set up, you know, their influence. And so all the Cromwells, this Puritan regime in England, have been their agents all this time for centuries. And we just see how just bad Cromwell is. He is just taking drugs, drinking. He's an emotional wreck, babbling about God, and, you know, just he's ranting. He's really in a bad place. He's hit rock bottom. He's looking at this pornography magazine, Nuns in Heat, and he realizes he needs discipline. So I guess there's a whole cadre of women there who have to satisfy his desires by dressing up as sexy nuns and, you know, whipping him, kind of S&M type stuff. Because he's just an all-around perv, sadist and masochist. And when the woman comes up there, he is just really at rock bottom. He's crawling through glass, and he vomits on a crucifix. And he's like, I'm damned. So he is just not a good leader. He's a totally evil man, but he's also very, very messed up. And now we finally get to see what's happened to Luther. And Luther is in the dissident detention center in Westminster. And they've just been torturing him every day, ever since they captured him. And they're trying to make him talk, give up information. I like these two interrogators as Luther kind of passes out once again. I think this is computer manipulation. And look how they turned into like a skull head. It's kind of clever, kind of neat. Here's a nice pinup of Luther. And we have a letter page finally. So it's kind of interesting. And that's it for this issue. Now let's get to number 6. This issue is very trippy. This is like an underground comic. Very kind of psychedelic cover there. Very strange colors. Pink and blue and green. Looks very odd. Chapter 6, The Doors of Perception, which is an apt name for this, because this is very heady, this issue. So we start off, we're inside Luther's head, and here we go with this very stream of consciousness writing from Brian Talbot. So it very much reminds me of Don McGregor in the 70s, or even Steve Gerber did it sometimes. But it's a little annoying to read, to be honest, the stream of consciousness. But he's a good writer, so at least it reads like a kind of like a good poem as far as like a richness of language, you know? And so we see he's being interrogated, but can barely even think about, like, he's off in another place, obviously. I'll give you an example of this. He tastes vinegar, pulse quickens, marching turns into a hammering, a crown of thorns rises on his brow, synapses explode, raw nerves ending, shriek intolerance. And this is just the beginning. It gets more stream of consciousness as we go on. Here's an interesting thing is, it's totally different style here. Kind of interesting. I'm glad he doesn't draw like this all the time, though. I don't like it as much. And now Luther is totally in his head here, and he's having more flashbacks. And basically he's kind of has this knowledge he never had before. And we see him being born. And I don't know if you guys remember, a few issues back, he saw that article. When he first came to this reality, this dimension, he read the article about his father dying, who was an RAF pilot. After the war, he died in this fire with his mother. We find out what really happened. The disruptors came and burned them all and took Luther. And so Luther was raised by the disruptors ever since birth to almost be like their ultimate assassin. From like his first few years, he's trained in every martial art. and the ways of warfare. That's why Luther Arkwright's so kick-ass. It's not just that year with the 5 monks he spent. That just was for his psychic powers. But he already was this, like, ultimate warrior. And so, of course, he's trapped there. And one day, when he's like 14, he sees the 5 monks. They come to him in a vision and invade his thoughts. And it inspires him or causes him to escape finally. And for the first time, he manifests his psychic powers. He's surrounded by the guards of this place. And he just like screams, and it kind of like blows everyone's mind. And I think he even travels. He teleports away. And once again, we see Rosewild finding him. Jumps ahead to that point. And the whole time, this is all stream of consciousness writing. So here's where it gets crazy. This totally looks like a 70s Marvel page by Don McGregor. At least just the layout. And so here's an example. The Garden of Earthly Delights, Arkwright embraces the Black Madonna. The divine consort Aphrodite rises from the sea, dripping with the juices of love. Osiris spreads her feathered cloak over Christ, and Magdalene desperately copulating in the Garden of Gethsemane. Kali becomes Miranda. Take this, my Ankh, the Egyptian sign of life. Renounce the ways of violence. Luther, the tabla beat faster. The sitar changes to a distant balalaika. Siberian winds howl. I gotta stop there. That's enough. But so it does have a nice language to it, but it is kind of hard to trudge through all this stream of consciousness stuff. And as you can see, the art is almost stream of consciousness. There's just images flowing into each other. We see all these memories, also things that haven't happened, but like almost nightmare visions. But a lot of them are prophetic. Continues in this manner, and it looks like Luther's getting closer and closer to death. Oh, sorry, there it is. His EKG flatlines. La Mort. And then he dies. Kundalini Shakti, great magic power, unites with Shiva. Pure consciousness, the Lord of fire and light, the 1,000-petaled lotus unfurls, the rock of ages splits open, white light spills out. And so he's having his after-death experience here, kind of heading towards the white light. And then look at, I love this, even though it's you're not really getting your money's worth on these next few pages, but it's like everything simplifies. You can almost hear the whoosh of that sound in a movie, just like a terrible beauty, radiant white fire, perfect, pristine, pure, the celestial ether, the astral light, Akasha. Look at this. But it does seem like a cheat, like something John Byrne would do in Alpha Flight, that famous Blizzard issue. But it really works as far as like, oh man, this is the void. So basically, Luther, by accepting death, his own death, he's resurrected. Probably because of his psychic powers. That didn't hurt. And we see the torturers. They're like, oh my God, he's dead. We're in big trouble. Cromwell's going to kill us. We cut away to Rose. And Rose is with Frida. It appears that they are now lovers. And Rose wakes up from a dream. She's having a psychic wave from Luther. And so, of course, she's worried. The woman who owns this little cottage or whatever where they're staying, she comes in. Look at her face, guys. It looks like Ben Grimm's grandmother. Like, she is so craggy and old. She looks like she's 130. And so Rose and Frida talk about the revolution that's right around the corner. And we find out that Rose is the head of the Daughters of Albion, who are basically a woman revolutionary group. So all the revolutionary groups across England are combining their forces. All the chiefs are going to meet soon, and they're going to take out Cromwell, or attempt to, after all these centuries. We see the Germans plotting away here, the Kaiser and his guy. And if you remember from last episode, they're planning, they're supposed to be allies of the royalist revolutionaries, but they really just want to take England over for themselves. Now we see Rose with all the chiefs of these various factions, and they're all united, and they're going to try to take down the government. We see these some other quotes about metaphysical things, and we see Dr. S. Haywood, The Occult Tarot. I don't know if this is a real book. 1914 it says. And basically they're saying that, La Morte card, what we saw that La Morte card, that's really about change. So, Luther kind of foreshadows what's going to happen. Luther isn't dead. He's been resurrected. He's changed. And he rises up from his funeral with his funeral shroud still on him. And, of course, the torturers are freaking out. They're like, his eyes. And he kills them all. Kills them both. Or at least he wipes their minds. They're just like, they're drooling idiots. And here he is, transformed. Luther Arkwright, reborn. Obviously, there's lots of, I didn't even mention that in the stream of consciousness. Well, you heard some of it. Lots of Christ imagery, all kinds of metaphysical, religious imagery. But definitely, he's pushing on the whole Christ thing. And here we see him, and he's really transformed. It's almost like he's a step up the evolutionary ladder now. Nervous system reprogrammed for higher functioning. New circuits formed and imprinted. Blood clots, bones knit. Tissue regenerates. It's almost like he's a demigod now. He has control over his own body, and his psychic powers have been increased a lot. So he walks right through the wall. This is how changed he is. This is some really cool art where he's showing the almost vertiginous viewpoint of Luther walking through these hallways. Very MC Escher. And he goes to the guards, the place where the guards hang out, kills them all. It looks horrifying. It looks like he makes them explode from within or something. Look at this guy's neck. He basically takes the blood off his face, and he flies over the fence. This almost looks like John Severin, God, look at this illustration here, guys. The trees here in the forest. This page is really, I like this page a lot. It reminds me of manga. Hey, not that I'm an expert. The little manga I've read, where they'll just slow down the story just to show scenes of nature. And everything stops for a page. Slows down. Love this series of panels here of this bird flying past this tree. Some kind of kestrel or something. Yeah, I really love this page. It's like the stuff I was showing off in The Legend of Kamui, where, God, that comic would sometimes have 4 pages of just like animals doing various things. So Luther reunites with Queen Anne, or the soon-to-be Queen Anne. This is Charles' sister, if you remember from last issue. And it seems like Luther also has the power now, just like the guy in the Dead Zone, the Stephen King book. When he touches someone, he gets basically all their memories flow into him. And we see that Anne, she grew up in Ireland. She was molested by a priest for most of her childhood. Just this complex, interesting life, He sees it all. And basically Anne is there with all the troops, all the revolutionaries planning on attacking London any day now. And we kind of realize that they've definitely been together. And she's now pregnant with his children. They're twins. And as they walk to the encampment, I like these 3 panels, it's nice. We get another report from Hiram Kowalski. He is now embedded with these revolutionaries. He's in this camp. We have an article here just describing the opening sequence of this issue by Mike Kidson, which is kind of a neat idea since it is very confusing and it's very complex and weird. This is a pretty iconic cover. I think they made a poster of this. I love this image. Really nice. Great colors. As far as I know, Brian Talbot's been coloring all these covers because there's never a credit for a colorist. He's a really good colorist, too. Chapter 7, Destiny's Angel. So we're walking around the encampment. They have these juggernaut-like tank devices. I guess before he died, Charles designed these or paid for these. These were his babies, you know. I think they're called the dreadnoughts. Anne's cousin comes out. He's this kind of foppish guy. He's in charge of the dreadnoughts, but he's also, he seems kind of foppish, but he's also apparently quite a good tactician and good at strategy. Anne's character is very interesting. She's obviously like the good guy in this struggle. But just like Charles, it's like she's kind of vain, very imperial. I mean, she's a queen, or, you know, she's always been brought up to believe she's a queen. So it's kind of interesting where, you know, they don't just make her like, oh, she's all around cool. So Luther and Anne make love. And later on, once again, Luther meditates. So he's totally changed now. He realizes it. He has no hair on his body left. He walks out naked into the encampment. He borrows a flag to drape around himself because he realizes people are staring at him. And then we just have these beautifully illustrated panels of him walking around, and he's reunited with Harry Fairfax. Harry is like almost dead, even though he's so cantankerous. He's still telling jokes and drinking. But now we see the extent of Luther's powers. We also see, you know, obviously another Christ-like analogy where Luther heals Harry with his hands. Of course, by doing so, he also sees Harry's whole history, and his parents were killed and raped by the Puritan soldiers, so his whole life he's hated the Puritans. Now, he also sees the reporter again, Hiram. And Hiram has another letter to America here. Back in Westminster Square, I believe, it doesn't tell us what reality this is, but I assume it's the one we've been in. I'm not sure, though. Just Frida and Rose. I think this is the reality with Cromwell. So Rose meets with Luther. And yes, guys, I'm sorry. This is definitely the reality that we've been in. Sorry. I was confused because the 00 Valhalla Nova Rose always wears this skull cap. A different skull cap. So Rose tells Luther that she's going to basically be dressed up as Britannia to rally the troops and give them inspiration. Rose gives him the special weapon, and Luther is basically his mission. He's going to take out Cromwell and his whole cabinet with his new powers. We're getting back to the non-linear storytelling, like the first few issues, where we just see all these random images. The 5 monks, as Rose debriefs Luther. We see Cromwell praying. We see them making love, panels of them making love. The future, when she's dressed as Britannia. Kind of interesting. You definitely got to slow down to read this part. It's worth it because it all matters, you know, all these random panels. They either foreshadow something or they are a flashback to something. So the battle's about to begin. The troops are all massed and they're heading towards London. Unfortunately, Anne is just about to drop her babies. Her court physician, or whatever he's called, he's just all like, you're going to labor, for Christ's sake. You can't lead an army. And she's like, I got to. And so we see all of the troops. And meanwhile, we see... Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get to this later because this is another foreshadowing here, another foreshadowing panel. Yeah, a lot of these, it's almost like a rhythmic thing. We'll see these panels again and again. And so Luther climbs to the parapet and dives off. Now we see back at Valhalla Nova, the two people who hatched this plan, Rose and this other guy, I think that's Carl, her lover, they're basically getting dressed down by the World Council. They're like, this whole plan that you guys started with this disrupting that dimension with Cromwell, it's unethical, it's not what we do. And it's like, you guys knew that Wotan commanded us to do this. The world computer said this is what we have to do. So it kind of becomes this argument. And we just keep cutting really quick. We see Luther diving off the thing again. We see observers, Puritan soldiers, observing the massed armies heading on London. And then this becomes a visual motif for the next few pages. Luther's body just flying through the sky like Superman. Meanwhile, back at Valhalla Nova, they're still arguing with their superiors. And finally, they just walk out because it's a crisis moment. Wotan is almost completely fritzed and fried. They don't even know if it's going to be able to finish its job. Because if you remember, the whole reason why they're doing these shenanigans in the Cromwell dimension is because they want to lure the disruptors out and from their home dimension, and then Wotan can get a beat on them. And they could follow them back to their home dimension and neutralize the threat of Firefrost and stop this whole multi-dimensional crisis. Meanwhile, in the meeting with Cromwell, we see those two bishops. You know, they've got the briefcase. The bomb's about to go off in 4 minutes. And one of the guys has to inform Cromwell that Arkwright escaped. And his shroud even has a... Look at that. It's like the Shroud of Turin. So really hammering home this Christ-like similarity. And basically Cromwell won't let anyone leave. Because, of course, these priests want to get out of there. They had this whole plan to be like, oh, we have to do this thing at a certain time. Cromwell's like, you're not going anywhere. So, of course, they're sweating. They're like, oh, shit, what are we going to do? These things are getting out of hand now. These random incidents is throughout the dimensions. More and more nuclear holocausts. San Diego overrun by Mexican bandit hordes. That was a weird one. We also see the Germans now with their whole plot. They're going to wait till the Royalists kill all the Puritans, take over, and then they're going to attack and take over England for themselves. And see, once again, like, look, now we see Luther climb the parapet yet again. It's almost like it's a CD skipping, you know, or a DVD scene. It's just like kind of time is becoming in a weird flux. And once again, we see the image of him flying. That's a pretty great page. Their perspective on that, it's nice. We have a beautiful pinup here by Talbot. This is really interesting. Look, it's Grant Morrison. I've never seen him draw. I know he started as a cartoonist, a drawer. It's him drawing Luther Arkwright and Dave Gibbons. So that's interesting, getting their two interpretations of Luther. Coming attraction page, and I think that's it for this issue. Now we have Rose on the cover as Britannia. Chapter 8, The Battle of London. This is a pretty action-packed issue. So once we start off where we left off pretty much, and Luther's flies through the sky and crashes into Cromwell's meeting room with his whole cabinet there. Kind of like these series of panels here. And he's got this weapon that Rose gave him, this special weapon, and he starts taking him out. It's very much like a quick cut film scene, you know, like Sam Peckinpah. It's just like bam, 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 beat, beat, beat. All equal sized panels. You almost get the sense that this is all happening in like 2 seconds. The briefcase is opened up with the bomb in it. The only guy reacting is Pennington, and we see him slowly, like panel by panel, reaching for his gun as Luther takes out all these other guys. It's like totally like just like in a movie during a slow motion scene. God, all these faces. Talbot is so good. I really see the John Severin influence. Well, I didn't even notice that how it's almost like diagonal. You can watch his progress of pulling the gun out. This is kind of a bravura sequence, I think. This is really great storytelling. I love this, just how it totally slows everything down. But it's also speeding things up. It's like action. So much action in like 3 seconds, probably. The secretary of Cromwell's running, getting help. We keep cutting away to her. And basically everyone's dead now except for Cromwell, and he's just on his knees praying. Luther goes up to him, and as he's close to him, he can see all of Cromwell's memories, all of his horrible deprivations, his painful childhood. I really like that panel. And Luther finally takes him out, blows his head off. But the strain of this, because Cromwell and his cabinet, they all had disruptor defenses, psychic defenses. So to get through those, for him to actually kill them, his psychic powers had to fight these defenses. And he is just, it's almost killed him. It's like totally brutalized his brain. He's puking. He can barely move. And meanwhile, the clock is still ticking on that bomb. So the suspense is building. Now we see Anne, and her doctor is still arguing with her, saying, you gotta give birth to these babies. We see the Germans just having a banquet, basically, watching all the chaos and just like, oh, get ready, guys. We're going to mop up soon. We'll mop up all these dumbasses and take over England. So Rose and Carl in Valhalla Nova, they run down to where Wotan is. And it's not looking good. Wotan is on its last legs. So Luther is almost dead from this psychic feedback. And so when the secretary runs in, he puts his hands on her. He sees her memories. And we find out she had a total crush on Cromwell and had these fantasies of being his wife. And he totally kills her. He totally, look at this. He just sucks all of her energy out like a vampire. And he's strengthened. And now he's back to full strength. He shoots off a flare, which was the sign for the rebels to attack London. Another beautiful page. Look at all these great faces. God, his illustrations are so good. And we find out how the war goes from Hiram Kowalski's letters back to America. And finally, Anna's got to lay down and give birth. Her water breaks. But the battle's going well, so they're fine. Man, this is some really great art. Some fun stuff going on. Once again, we just see like quick cuts of just all the characters just jumping around. And now the Prussians are moving in. They're about to move in. Because it looks like the Puritans are pretty much done. And then Luther comes back to help out the rebels. They see a mass hallucination of Agincourt from the Bayeux Tapestry. It seems to be a recurring motif in this. Anne gives birth to her twins, a boy and a girl. And there just seems to be all these like mass hallucinations in the skies, these images in the clouds. And it's right then, just as Wotan crashes, finally, the disruptors enter the dimension, which was the plan all along, but now it's the worst possible time. So they're going to try to set things right for Cromwell. Letter page, and the last issue, number 9. This is an interesting cover. It's the only cover where there is a color credit. It's Matt Wagner colored this. And you can tell the difference. It's really nice coloring. I think it looks a little better than the other covers. Chapter 9, The Hand of God. And Luther realizes the disruptors are there. The Rooks. That's what those armored soldiers are called. Britannia is shot down by them and killed. We see all the daughters of Albion reacting. Frida carries her away. Luther gives her a final kiss. But then he says, "Be seeing you," because you know there's many rose wilds in many dimensions. And we find out that even though Wotan has crashed, all is not lost. Luther can now track the home dimension of these disruptors, his new powers. And so we see him phase out and pop up there. This is like some Paul Galassi stuff going on here. This looks nice. So he's in the stronghold of the disruptors. It's a giant spaceship. Look at that. Some like decaying, ancient spaceship. So in England, the disruptors are killing all the royalist revolutionaries. And killing the Germans too. And then Luther finally confronts the leader of the bad guys. And it's this guy who looks like God, like, the classic interpretation of God. And he tells them the story about how he was one of the guys, the scientific elite who created Fire Frost. I don't know if you guys remember the story from last episode. There was these warring cosmic civilizations for millennia. After millennia, they were at war. One of them decided to make this ultimate weapon to stop the war as a deterrent, and it seemed to work. But of course, somebody blew it up. The whole galaxy imploded on itself, and then the few survivors, including this guy and some other guys, they escaped before that happened. And they've kind of been refugees. And he's trying to basically mentally seduce Luther. Just saying like, you're so above those humans now. You're homo novus. Join me, my son. You're above the humans. They're a bunch of lowly insects. They're maggots. But Luther's not going to buy it. And so we find out that the 5 monks, that was just Luther's mental interpretation of them. They really don't look like 5 Buddhist monks, but I guess because they were wise, and he grew up in the Christian tradition, the Western tradition. So that's how he visualized them, as just being these wise mystics. So he made them look like Tibetan monks. They're really rebels from this dimension. They were fighting this godlike guy because, they didn't, he was a fascist, and they were like, this isn't the way. And so Luther starts having a psychic war with him, and we get some more groovy, crazy, psychedelic shit. Look at this, more stream of consciousness, but in a different way, in all these little balloons. My name, 1. I had a dream the other night. 4. Nullify. 3. Was assassinated in Memphis. It's very weird and disjointed. Man, look at this slick art here. Now we get more of the history of the 5, the 5 monks, but they're really just called the 5. And Luther wins the mental battle, and basically the God guy, he falls. And when he does, all the rooks, it's like puppets with their strings cut. They have no more driving force. And so for a second, Luther becomes one with the universe. All the power of this guy, this God, he feeds on it, and he becomes like God. He can feel the whole universe. The galaxy swirl at his feet. In the few remaining nanoseconds before he's lost to the totality of creation, he pulls himself back. And he splits Fire Frost, returns to his own body, knits it up, because he was once destroyed again in that battle, and then basically destroys the bad guys. Now we're back in England. We see the Germans, and Luther basically kills them all with Cyclone B. He just gasses them all, poisons them. We see Anne. Luther sends a telegram to Octobriana and says, the Tsar's retired. Storm the Winter Palace now at your convenience. It's all clear now. And we see Octobriana with her wicked smile. And back in Westminster, Luther is now down to earth, back to earth, and he just like when he was viewing the Bayeux tapestry earlier in the very first issue, he was basically saying this is a symbol of how humanity has always been harsh to each other and always been murderous. And so he's walking around seeing that the royalists, the Catholics, are treating the Puritans just as badly as they were treated. They're just massacring these Puritans, killing these people, raping them, taking their property, burning their property. But, Luther knows he can't stop it. Once again, beautiful illustration here. I love this. They show a bunch of magazines, detritus, and there's a magazine. There's like Puritan Magazine, My Struggle by Matthew Cromwell, and then The Simple View, Essential Puritan Morality by S. Ditko. I fucking love that. That's so dead on, because in this world, that's what Steve Ditko will be writing. Oh, it's all black and white, evil and good. He would even see a little inset of the Bayeux tapestry, like a little asterisk, because Luther's thinking about how, nothing ever changes. He has a vision of all these Valkyries coming down from the sky. God, that page is so, that's some obsessive compulsive behavior going on. And then we see Anne ensconced as the new queen, and Hiram's writing a report about it. And he's skeptical. She dissolves Parliament. She says some things about being imperial, about the sun never setting on the English Empire. And Hiram's like, new boss, same as the old boss. This might not be the best thing. So I really hope that the sequel, Heart of Empire, which we're going to look at probably tomorrow, I really hope it still involves these characters and Anne, because she's a very interesting character. I love more of this detritus of just like, we see trading cards of the war for the Battle of London with art by Hiram Kowalski, because he's also an illustrator. And I love how they even make it look like that kind of socialist art from the 20s. We see a Harry Fairfax figurine, hero of the Revolution, a jigsaw puzzle, a record, the Battle of Britain. I just love all this extra thought. It's almost like the back matter in The Watchmen, really thinking about this world. Now we see Luther is at Rose's funeral. At least that dimensions Rose's funeral. And Anne is in her limousine. She doesn't come, though. Come in to the funeral proceedings. She just watches from afar. See, we see that image again. And now we're in a totally different dimension a little later. And Rose is just fine in this dimension. She shows him a penny dreadful about Luther. And Rose goes to get him a drink or something, get some more wine. And when she comes back, Luther has that crazy, weird pistol that killed Cromwell in his cabinet. It's some kind of bizarre sci-fi weapon. She says, why have you unholstered your weapon? And he grabs it and he throws it into the sky. Remember, we've seen that image before, foreshadowed. And it falls into the river. And that's the end. So throughout this, they've talked about, Brian Talbot talks about how Luther was basically born to be a weapon. He was bred to be a weapon. And through the influence of those the five, the monk-looking guys, he finally realized that, it's got to be, peace is a better way. This is kind of interesting. We get a little extra from English cartoonist Al Davidson, probably best known for The Spiral Cage, and it's called Viva Octobriana. We see these kind of protesters in Russia. The school teacher, she's walking home from school. I kind of like Al Davidson. He's a little rough. He's a little inconsistent, but I kind of like his stuff. And she finds a box with a red star in it. When she opens it up, it's Octobriana's costume, her sexy costume. And she goes to run off to, I assume, join the barricades and fight for democracy. And here's a little pinup of Octobriana by Al Davidson. Nice stuff. Really want to get this. It's an ad for some magazine. Reprints that very first Luther Arkwright story, The Papist Affair, the kind of goofy one. That really has nothing to do with the story. It was just a tryout. And it has a written piece by Neil Gaiman and an interview with Brian Talbot. I never heard of this. So I have a feeling they didn't publish many. The Crystal Palace exhibition of 1990. I'm probably never going to find that before I die. Definitely want it, though. And that's it, guys, for the Adventures of Luther. No, excuse me. The Adventures of Luther Arkwright, 1 through 9. I'm sorry, 5 through 9. We did 1 through 4 yesterday. So I'm going to keep going on this Arkwright trail, guys. And next episode, we're going to be looking at 1 through 4 of Luther Arkwright, The Heart of Empire, which is the sequel to this. And that was also 9 issues and also from Dark Horse Comics. Hope you guys enjoyed looking at this. I wanted to mention, because I didn't really mention this earlier, since this started in like 78, the first episodes, that's really like before steampunk was even close to being a thing. So it is kind of interesting. But I guess Nemesis the Warlock in 2000 AD was kind of doing this proto-steampunkiness, Victorian sci-fi. So I just wanted to point that out. Kind of definitely an early adopter of kind of steampunk imagery, mixing up alternate realities and stuff. But yeah, that's it for today's episode. Hope you guys liked it, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.